Tommy said months and months ago, we need to have Dave Ward down. And I said, right, okay, if you want to, because I'm always the one who says who's coming, and I thought, oh, we'll let Tommy choose this year. And he couldn't have chose better after what happened last week with the posties strike, and I'm sure you'll go into that. So, ladies and gentlemen, Dave Ward from the Communication and Workers Union.
I was asked not to touch the mic, and I've already done it before we started. Yeah, look, thanks very much, and also, you know, welcome to everybody, and especially to some of our postal members from this town, who I'm sure voted yes in the recent strike ballot. Thanks for coming out tonight. You got an early start in the morning, and thanks to Merthyr Tydfil Trades Council for this invite in delivering the Stephen Owen Davies Memorial Lecture. I mean, it really is appreciated that you've asked me to come here. I've never done this sort of thing before as a lecture. I do a lot of rallies, a lot of speeches, and it's an honour. It's an honour because, I suppose, first of all, because of who So, I think, as you say, was as a person and what he stood for. And a miner, a trade union leader, somebody who moved into politics as a Labour politician and, as I understand it, became an independent MP for this town when he was 84, I think, for the last couple of years of his life. What that tells me is that he was somebody who was fiercely loyal to defending the working class people of this town. And I will start by saying I think that, and that type of person, is what's missing in politics, not just today, but probably for the last 30 or 40 years. And I think that that type of person missing in the Labour Party during that period, I'm a great supporter of Jeremy and John and what they've achieved, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But I think it's that absence of that type of person in politics who made that bridge from the trade union movement into politics that has allowed the sort of neoliberal economy to take shape, the privatisation agenda that has borne people like Thatcher and what we've seen destroyed in this country over those years. And the reason I say that is that I think there's a lot of people who do politics in theory. There's not many who do politics for real or in practice. And I think that's what we need in the UK. So I'm really honoured to be here to deliver this memorial lecture to somebody who had such a strong history of the trade union movement and Labour movement. Secondly, it's obviously an honour to come to Merthyr Tydfil because, you know, I am aware of what a history this town has, an industrial history, a social history, a trade union, Labour movement history, dare I say it, a sporting history. And, you know, I was taken a few years back, quite a few years back now, when I read a book. I love sport, I love boxing. And I read the book, Johnny Owen's book, The Merthyr Matchstick Man. And what was fantastic about that book, it was a great book about boxing, but it was a fantastic book about this town and about what it was like living and growing up in this town and the values. And I learnt a lesson in reading that book, which was about sport, and it was about his dad. And I remember recommending the book to so many people, mostly because of the way that his dad showed such dignity after he died in the ring. And I remember saying, I think the boxer that he fought and died was a guy called Louis Pinter, and it was out in America where he died. And his dad went from, like, you know, unbelievable grieving for his son to showing such solidarity with the boxer who'd brought about his death, obviously by accident, and actually went out of his way to reach out to that individual who himself was in a traumatic state as to what happened. Actually went out and said to him, you need to carry on boxing. because he recognised that that guy, and I remember it came across vividly in the book, that guy was exactly the same type of person as Johnny Owen. He'd come up from nothing, he'd fought his way to earn a living, and that guy, I think he was a Mexican boxer or South American boxer, and they became great friends after that. And that was a lesson, not in sport, that was a lesson in socialist values, in our beliefs. So, you know, this is a great place to be, because I can sense it's a place where real people live, and I think will always live. So I'm really pleased to be here. The third reason I'm grateful to be here is because I saw the list of people who have spoken before me. And there's been some great speakers here, and three that I'll mention. Jeremy himself, Guy was saying to me there that when he came, it was about, I think it was about a month before he became leader of the Labour Party, and at that time no one ever dreamed that Jeremy Corbyn would become leader of the Labour Party. What a long way we've come. Let's hope after today's announcement that he might be, a month after I've spoken here, that he might be the Prime Minister of this country, because we need it. John McDonnell, I think, has spoken here. And John is a great thinker about what's required. And I can say to you with some confidence that what I've learned in working with these guys in the last few years is that the level of detail that never really gets talked about, that they're thinking about day in, day out, about how they're going to change society for the good and the offer that they're going to make to the British people and how they're going to do that in a joined up way. It is incredible. And I hope that when we get to that point, which I think needs to happen now, that we can get through Brexit and start to set out that agenda, because that agenda will transform people's lives. So it's fantastic to come here and know that I've spoken on the same platform effectively as those two great Labour leaders. And thirdly, Mark Sawatka has spoken here. And Mark is somebody who I admire immensely in the trade union movement. I admired him before his illness. I've got to say I admire him even more subsequently, because, you know, this guy is a courageous man. To think that he has had a heart transplant and he's actually come back stronger. And if you listen to Mark speak, I mean, he is an inspirational speaker in every sense of the word, and a great trade union and leader and a friend. So, you know, to just be here and speak knowing that they've all done that is phenomenal for me. So look, I'm here to deliver a lecture, and there's two things have happened to me this year in my life that I'd never done before. The first, believe it or not, was I got asked to chair the Labour Lifelong Learning Commission. Don't know why they asked me, but they did. I don't think the previous Labour regime would have asked me, but this one did. And I said to them, I've never actually chaired a meeting. I said, I speak at a lot of meetings, and I've spoken at lots of meetings over my life, but I'd never chaired a meeting before. But anyway, they said, no, carry on. So that was a first. And the second is giving this lecture. Now, I've heard a lot of lectures, not in university. I've heard them sort of lectures where you get reprimanded and scolded for doing things wrong. Don't do that. Make sure you never do that again. And why are you doing that? So this is so you got me here giving a lecture, and I'm grateful for Tom, because he said, you know, in the email you sent me, you said it's a very relaxed kind of setting, and you can talk about what you want. So I'm going to talk about Chelsea's win over Ajax last night, 1-0 away from home with our young team, and I'm going to talk about Bruce Springsteen's new album, Western Stars, which I would highly recommend. And if it goes well, I might even sing a song about it a bit later. But no, look, I want to talk about the future of the trade union movement. And I'll start by perhaps just giving you a little bit of background about myself in the movement, and I'll tell you where I think the movement is. I don't actually like talking about the future as some sort of analysis of what's gone wrong and what we've got to do. I like to talk about it as a plan that we've got to implement, and that's what hopefully will come across tonight. So I started out as a telegram boy in 1976 for Royal Mail, or the Post Office, GPO as it was then, and it nearly didn't happen. I was nearly on my way to a holiday camp where I'd signed up with a couple of friends left school, didn't have any qualifications, and we decided that we was going to go and work in a holiday camp on the Isle of Wight. And we actually signed the forms. And about 2 weeks from when I was going to go down there to be a waiter, my uncle said to me, come and join the post office. He was a postman at Battersea at that time. And he said to me, I'll get you an interview, you know, you'll be all right, you'll come in there. So I did. I had to let my two mates down. They never forgave me because they'd built themselves up that we were all going to go down to the Isle of Wight. And I said to them literally about a week before we were due to go, look, I'm going to join the post office. I don't know where it came from. There was no sort of burning desire to really do anything, if I'm being honest, at that time. So I went and joined as a telegram boy. And then when you became 18 as a telegram boy, you had an option in them days, in the GPO. You could actually go, the GPO in them days was also included what is now British Telecom. And you could go, if you'd been there at 16, you could go and try and see if you could get a job in the postal side. You could go behind the counter. You could go for an engineer's job. And I did try and get an engineer's job. And I failed the test because I found out I was partially colourblind. You know, all them wires in them days, there were so many colours, I couldn't see what was going on there. So I ended up going into my local sorting office at the time in Tooting. And somebody asked me this on Saturday. I was doing a young workers event, and they asked me what was the sort of moment where you became aware of trade unions. And mine wasn't through any kind of sort of history that I'd read. My mum was a rep, but she never really used to talk about it too much. My dad was a strong Labour voter, but never really talked about it. We didn't. But it was literally what happened within about 2 weeks of me being 18 and starting work now in the sorting office as opposed to being a telegram boy, which was a different office. So I'd been in this office and I'd passed my test and I'd been out training on my delivery, on the delivery round. And I'd come back, and one day I got back quite early. And that meant that if you got back early, you could have a bit of a longer meal break, breakfast. And I'd got back very early. I was a lot fitter than I am now, and I managed to get around quite quick. And I got back, and there wasn't really many people back in the office. So I put my sack up on one of the frames at the back of the office, and I thought to myself, that's handy. I'll walk down and I'll go to breakfast. And I started walking across the sorting office floor like this, walking up towards the canteen, thinking I'd done a good day's work already. Like I'd been up since about 5 o'clock in the morning. It was about 9 o'clock. And I heard a big booming voice coming out from the other end of the sorting office floor. And it was the manager. Now, I'd been in this office about 2 or 3 weeks because you had to do a couple of weeks training. He'd never spoken to me once. He'd never asked me how I was getting on. He'd never said to me, you know, have a good career in the post office. Never come near me or by me. And it wasn't a massive office, about 110 people there. And what I heard was, he wasn't talking to me, he was shouting at me. And he was in his door, with the door open to the sorting office floor, and he was sitting behind his desk. And he shouted out to me, Mr. Ward, don't walk across my sorting office floor with your hands in your pockets. Now, this was in 1978. And I was somebody who didn't sort of take kindly to that stuff. Worse then than what I am now, probably. So my immediate reaction was to say, I shouted back at him with quite a lot of force and aggression. And I said, who the effing hell do you think that you're talking to? And I meant it. And I'd lost it. And I started walking towards him for a confrontation. And as I was walking towards him, I thought, that's it. I'm out here. I'm going to get sacked. I've only been here a couple of weeks. Well, and honestly, I wasn't really that bothered. And I was sort of walking across, and I thought, like, the thing that was uppermost in my mind was this man was not going to speak to me like that. So as I got closer to him, I was getting ready for the sort of confrontation. And the doors opened on the sorting office floor, and a fella came in. And he shouted out, I heard that. And I looked round and I thought, bloody hell, there's a postman here now, and he's having a go at me. And But actually, he started looking at the manager and he went, don't you ever talk to some of our young workers like that? And the manager went, boom, like that, and he went back in the office. And he introduced himself to me. He said, I'm the union guy here. A true story, a bloke called Alan Fiander, who I still see on occasions. He lives on his own now. He's not in the best of health. He's about 80 now. But he wasn't, I wouldn't call him a fantastic trade unionist, but he certainly knew how to stand up for himself. And it sort of stuck with me. And I thought to myself, well, this is good. There's actually people here who stand up for you. And at a very young age, basically, I got involved in the local branch at Tooting. There were some great people in that office. I don't know how they all came together at that time, but I learnt a lot off of so many people in that office. And I became a rep at quite a young age. We had a committee. In them days, I mean, you'd have an election for your committee. It was an office of 110 people. There were 10 committee places, and you'd have about 20 people putting their name up to be on the committee. And if we had AGMs, people had to give written apologies, and you would have like 95% turnout of an evening outside of work for people to turn up to an AGM. So there was something special going on in the office anyway. And, you know, I did learn a lot from some characters that were around me, all of them older than me, but all of them very sort of helpful towards me at that time. I actually became a local rep and I took over the main position in the office at quite a young age. I think I was 21. And they asked me to do it. One of the guys went sick, a bloke who replaced him, Alan, went off. He didn't want to do it anymore. The guy who replaced him went sick, and they said to me, come in, we think you should do it. And I'll tell you this other story. I was really frightened about talking at that point to people, to an audience. And the first time I ever spoke in front of the members, I was getting very nervous. And I went upstairs and I spoke. And I didn't know how I sounded, really. Didn't know whether I got my message across or whatever. But the most senior person in the office, when I came down, he said to me, Dave, can I have a word with you? And this was a guy, Reg Earl, his name was. And he was like he'd done about 45 years at that time working for the post office. And he said to me, listen, boy, he said, you never got all your words out. He said, but you sounded sincere. And he said, that'd do for me. And I took so much confidence from that message that, you know, you've got to be real as a person when you represent people. And it held me in good stead all through my sort of life there. And I loved it there. I loved working. I didn't ever think about anything else other than being a rep in that office. I never thought about moving on in the union. I was a rep in that local office for 12 years before I did anything else in the trade union, in our own union. Then I moved on, disputes and whatnot, and you move on and you become a general secretary of a union, which is a fantastic thing for me to be proud of because of the people that I represent. And I honestly did not ever dream that one day you would be in that role. I look at this role with three things. This is where I want to get into the meat of what I think about the trade union movement. I look at it all the time. You can get taken with this, you're doing this one day, something else happens the next day. But every time I wake up, I think about these three things as what I put in boxes, but I connect them all, and they're like my objectives. One is, I see the job of a trade union to make sure that at the heart of everything we do, we have to protect and enhance, where possible, the terms and conditions of the members who are in the workplace. It's our number one objective, and it has to always be that way. The second thing that I keep thinking about is how can we reassert trade union values in society. So as a General Secretary, I see my role to really think hard about how we rebuild the trade union movement. And I spend a lot of time thinking about that. And I want to talk to you about that in a minute. And then the third thing is I've got to be committed to radical political change for this country, for the people that are our members, for people I see in society, for working class people, for my family, for my grandchildren, for my children. And when I do that, I just do a very simple kind of think about it. I think about what was happening when I was, say, 20, 21, and what's happening with them, and what's their lives like now. And that's my simple test, not a scientific economic test, it's just a simple test. So when I was that age, somehow, and I was probably one of the last generations that were able to do that, I got married young, we had children young, but I was able to get a council flat pretty much as soon as I got married. So me and my wife, we were able to start our family knowing that we had a roof over our head that we could afford. Now when I compare that to people today, they're more likely to have one room in a flat with 7 or 8 other people, sharing kitchens, sharing whatever. They're never going to have that place, or they're living back with you if they're your children, or they're coming and going. And that's our job. We've got to give them that support, and you know, it's a bolt hole that if you've got forward in life, you have to do that for your children. And then I look at a job, and I thought, well, I had that job. I didn't know truly at that point that I would still be working within that industry all through my life. But there was a saying then that people said, it's not the greatest job, but it's a job for life. And you sort of took a lot of comfort from that as a young person. I mean, this was in the time when there was lots of troubles. Thatcher was obviously just coming into power around that time. So, the miners' strike was about to kick off. And yet you had that support that we had from that job. And then I look at youngsters today, and I just don't see, for the job that I had, which wasn't the best paid job, they've probably got to do 3 jobs. And they're never going to be doing the same job, and they're never going to get any of the things that I took for granted. Holiday pay, sick pay, a pension. They won't have to or see them things. And then I think of, just generally how their life is at the moment, and the things that we took for granted in wider society that have been ripped up and broken by the Tories, by 40 years of privatisation, liberalisation, whatever you want to call it. Things like the National Health Service, things like caring for elderly people. And I keep looking, and then I look at things like climate change. And I just see everywhere I look so much injustice that we have to be totally committed, even as trade unionists, to understand what our social role is and what our role is in bringing to power Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell to transform the lives of people in this country. And I am totally committed to that, as well as those other 2 things. So what I try and do is think about how you join them things together. And I always think about that. I don't like being pushed into that one without understanding how that one links to that one and how that. And I try to bring that to the trade union. I'm trying to sort of talk about these things together, because when they are connected, I think we're very strong. When they're not connected, I think we're weak. And they are connected. Sometimes we don't always see it as trade unionists. You'll get people who are in trade unions and they will say, well, my job is to be the rep in this workplace, and I'm not really interested in the other stuff. And I understand that, and I totally love the fact that they've taken on the job of a rep for our union. They do a fantastic job. But if we can help all of us understand how that's connected to what happens in the wider trade union movement, and whether we can bring the movement together, and how ultimately that's connected to politics, and whether we can get Labour elected, then we're all going to be stronger. So let me talk a little bit about that bit about terms and conditions and a dispute that we're going through at the moment. So you would have seen that we had an unbelievable ballot result the other week. We didn't just beat the Tory threshold, we smashed it to pieces. We got a 97% turnout in what was almost a 97% yes vote for strike action on a 75% turnout. Now they are incredible figures. And I just want to spend a little bit of time, before I go on to what the dispute's about and what the solution we want from the dispute, and tactics that we might use. I want to talk to you about how we did that. Because we've been saying for some time to people, you know, that we've managed to get a level of engagement with our members that we didn't have previously. And we've done that by combining the best of social media with the most traditional way of face-to-face meetings, and through the fact that, thankfully, we've got a rep structure where representatives of the union are still powerful in the workplace. And that is a winning combination where I'm on record and I say we could win any ballot for industrial action. And what we do, if you've seen some of the stuff we do, we've got a fantastic communications team. And they've come in, and I've been responsible for bringing some of them in. Some of them are quite young people, and I just let them loose, to be perfectly honest with you. And I let them come up with ideas. And our head of comms, who's not as young, is a great ideas person, and we talk about those ideas, and all of the people, senior leaders of the union, do that. We've got some great union leaders in our union who are very good at speaking. They've come through those ranks. Terry Pullinger, our Deputy General Secretary, is a very good and effective speaker, and we make use of that by videoing those people and putting them out there all the time. And one of the greatest things I've noticed from that, never replace what you can get from social media with face-to-face communications. It's a mistake if anybody thinks you can communicate effectively or lead people just through that. You can have a row with people on social media all day long, but leading a movement, you can't do that purely on social media. But what you can do, if you've got both, and this has fascinated me from the time we started using it, is that if you ask people who are on social media to do something in support of something, it has amazed me how many of those people will actually go back to their sorting office and they will go, I've seen that on social media. There's an office down the road and they've just had a meeting. Why aren't we having a meeting? And it just goes round, and you obviously push one to follow the next one. I don't know if any of you have seen this, but we actually had postal workers queuing up. Now, whether this is legal or not, I'm not entirely sure. I think it is. So they were sealed ballot papers. They were bringing their ballot papers into workplaces and queuing up at a post box, one after the other, and putting them in to show Royal Mail that we'd voted, and we voted yes. I mean, this is phenomenal levels of engagement. And it's a way of, I believe, that we can win the general election if we combine those two things. If we mobilise people on the ground and connect it to what we're doing on social media, we can win that election. So the dispute, in many ways, it's like our moment, that never on the same scale, and I would never say that, of the miners and where the miners industry was and where the print industry was. Never on the same scale as either of those. But it is a defining moment for our industry, for the future of our members' jobs. And, you know, I say our members are not just defending their jobs here, they're defending the service, they're defending an industry that's been around for, you know, hundreds of years. And that's not easy, because we also recognise that the world of communications is changing. And actually, over the years, for some years now, the union has been the force for change. We've been the ones who've been arguing that we should do new things. We should try and innovate. We should develop our products and services. It's been the company that holds back from that. And essentially what the dispute is about is that the company have decided that they're going to invest in the future. And they're claiming that they're going to put £1.8 billion worth of investment into the future of Royal Mail. The problem is they want to do it by setting up a separate parcels company and basically letting the rest of our mail centre and delivery network wither on the vine. And this has come about as a result of a new CEO. The unions had successive agreements on how we were managing the challenge of communication change. And he's decided that he's got to reap the rewards of privatisation. We got privatised in 2013, but the truth is although there's been over £1 billion taken out and given to shareholders, they haven't yet succeeded in doing the journey of privatisation, because we got an excellent agreement back then that has held them at bay. And what I mean by that is they haven't been able to break the company up, and they're not interested in the guys there who are delivering in this town. They ain't going to come out and say that. We've got to expose that more and more. They're not interested in anybody who's delivering letters anymore. They see it as a burden. The universal service, which is often one of the only ways of contacting people that live in remote areas of the country, villages, towns, they don't want to do that anymore. And they've worked out a strategy where they don't have to have a row with anyone over that. The government, not that this government would support us, but there is legislation that the universal service, i.e. daily deliveries, 6 days a week, is still part of legislation. They're going to let it wither on the vine. And they're going to do that so that they can then make a case that it's uneconomical. And this is exactly what's happening across Europe in postal services at this moment as we speak. And the next directive that will come from the European Union on postal services will allow countries to take a lower view of what the universal service they provide. And that's the reality of that debate. So we're saying we can't accept that. You know, we're talking here about 110,000 people's jobs. And we've got a CEO who believes it's right to pretend that he's investing. Well, anyone can invest in a little bit here, but wants to set it up as a separate company. Of course, what he's going to do when he does that, he won't do it first step. This is like 2 or 3 steps to get to that point. He's going to then introduce the low-cost employment models that exist right across the UK. And he knows that we're too strong to allow him to do that, so he's got to separate it, and then he builds from that point. And I think we've got no choice here other than to say, no, this is not right. We're not going to accept that. The other thing that's happening is, and our members will probably recognise this, is that we call it the culture of work in delivery has become, very oppressive. It's become very pressurised, very similar to many other industries. Where every day you're expected to do more and more for less, basically, is in a nutshell, is what work is like. And of course, whilst not everybody's recognising this, my view of that is that we blame the managers, and there's a lot of very nasty managers, there's some good managers. But I actually think they're under incredible pressure as well. And one of the things that's at the root of it that I think this dispute needs to move on to is the use of technology. So what we've got now is technology that can basically watch every minute and every second of a day of where a postal worker is at any point out on their round. Now, there was a time when you used to celebrate the fact that a postal worker had a bit of time to make his own decisions, her decisions, about where they was going to go, what they were going to do. There was a time when they were empowered to talk to customers, where the post office and Royal Mail thought that was actually a good thing about his job, and virtually all of the public loved it. The fact that you knew your postal worker was coming down the street at some point was a thing that I think people took a bit of comfort from, and took a lot of community kind of spirit from. And what we've got now is technology. It does 2 things. One, it creates a work till you drop mentality, because it can see you, and we can't deny that. It's the same technology, actually, that we love using at times. There's a problem here. But what it also does, and I don't think this has been explored as much, is it actually creates a culture of management that will never, ever think about the future. They'll never, ever think about, well, this industry's got to go through big change. What can it do in the future? Because its whole mindset, from top to bottom, is about hitting a set of numbers, and those numbers are driven by what's on the technology that they've got. So they're never going to have the energy to think about how we innovate in the future. They're not interested in that. I think this is fundamental, and I think it's at the heart of everything that's going wrong in the world of work today. That's why I think it's such an important dispute. So that's our dispute. Now, what do we want from it? Well, there'll be lots of expectations with that type of ballot result, and this is not going to be an easy dispute to win, because essentially the leader of the company has decided that he's gone to the shareholders and he's actually said to the shareholders, I'm going to reduce your dividend so that I can invest money in the future. You need to give me 3 or 4 years where you're not going to get as much money. And they've bought that argument. But of course, the only way he can repay them is by letting the rest of the industry wither on the vine. And that's where he gets the dividend in the future. And that's going to be a massive... So essentially, it's the whole strategy of the company. We're up against it. So it's going to take a big effort from the union. Tactics. I don't think that we can win this particular dispute purely by taking industrial action, strike action. And I think we're going to have to think about some other things that we need to do. I'm always a great believer of being thoughtful about when and how you take industrial action and strike action. Your members put that trust in you. It's not our job to take them over the hill, you know, and like then, you know, we're in amongst them and we haven't got no plan. So I think we've got to think about that, and we will, but we may have to go there, and I know our members will support us if we do, and we probably will have to go there. I think this is a dispute, though, where I'd like to see us harnessing the support of you guys in every town and city in this country to understand what this dispute is about, and using the same methods that we used in order to get that ballot result, and using our members in a different way to harness support for this dispute in a way that has never been done before. And we're working on that. I want to announce tonight that on Monday of next week, we will be launching a supporters network of our union about this dispute. And we're seeing it online. Lots of people have seen the profile of the CWU raise over a number of years now. And they're saying to us, can we join you? And we're not a union at the moment that is in a position to be able to say that, and there's lots of other unions that deal with some of that. But you can join us from Monday. Hopefully it'll be from Monday when it's launched. If not, it'll be at some point next week, as a supporter of the CWU in this dispute, supporting postal workers, and we're going to set up a network. And we'll see how that leads into other action that will gain public support. The other thing that we're going to do differently in this dispute is we are going to target the shareholders. Not at their meeting, not at their annual meeting. We will be writing to all of the key shareholders in this company, all the big corporations. I'm not talking about the odd person that might have a few shares. I'm talking about the financial institutions that live to rip off services like ours. And we're going to ask them nicely to recognise that they should put pressure on the company to change their strategy. But we are going to tell them if they don't, we are going to target them as well. And we're going to start exposing some of the things that they do in their companies. And this is the strategy that we want to develop. It's an ambitious strategy, but it fits with the nature of the dispute. We'll do a number of different things. So that's our dispute. The second thing I want to talk about, and remember I keep talking about these things being connected, is what I call the New Deal for Workers campaign, which is something that the CWU has led on within the wider trade union movement. Is something that I passionately believe is the answer to rebuilding the trade union movement in the UK. It's also, and I make no apologies for this, it's also an opportunity to use this particular campaign to take us forward where we start thinking about what model of trade unionism do we need going forward. Because I think that the existing models need freshening up a bit. We need to think about how we do that. So it's not just about we've got a set of demands and we want a new deal for workers. It's about seriously trade union leaders and anybody who wants to be involved in this debate coming together and saying, let's have a think about what model we need to organise the unorganised workers who are not members of trade unions. And I make no apologies for this, and they know it. It's also about changing the role of the TUC in the UK and making that a role that is more fitting with the challenges that we face, not, you know, what it's become. And that's I'm not having a go at anybody there. I get on very well with Frances O'Grady. I think she's a good trade union leader. I just think there's an institution there that we need to drive forward in a different way for the sake of workers in the UK today. So our New Deal campaign has been something that was initiated by the CWU, but it has gathered support amongst other trade unions. And it started by me thinking, why can't we? There's no point in me going to a General Council meeting as a representative of the union that's elected me if I'm not there to try and bring people together and act as a strong force. And the greatest trade union leader of my generation, and I told him that when he was alive, Bob Crow, he used to try that all the time. He used to try that all the time. And Bob used to say, he used to get up there, and he was a great man, Bob, a very clever man, a great passionate trade unionist. And he used to try and do that. But there were too many, I suppose, different types of unions that weren't ready for some of those messages. So I've done a lot of thinking about that and tried to see how we can bring even those unions together. So we came up with a New Deal concept. And it had 4 simple points, and it has 4 simple points that we keep pushing and ramming home. And I want you to remember these 4 points this evening and think about talking to other people in trade unions if you're a member of a trade union. The first point is that why have we not got common bargaining agendas in sectors of the economy and industries where trade unions try to spread collective bargaining and in order to root out insecurity, in-work poverty and all the problems that are there in today's world of work. So that's the first point, and we're working on that. And Labour have got a great policy on this, by the way. Labour are going to introduce sectorial collective bargaining again, and they've been working fantastically well with John Hendy and Keith Ewing of the Employment Institute of Rights, and they've come up with some great policies there that we fully support. But we think we don't need to wait for Labour to do that. We need to move that forward. That's our job as a trade union movement. The second point is, I call it like, let's drop the competition between unions and let's replace it with cooperation between trade unions to organise workers. And I use this from an experience myself, and I think there's some great trade unions around at the moment. I think there's some great trade union leaders and activists at all levels of trade unions. And I really do believe that. But we've got ourselves in a place where we've got this, you know, we've been in decline, and therefore everybody's fighting everyone else for a member. But I use this all the time. AJ, you've probably heard this one, me talking about it. This is my daughter, who joined the 999 ambulance services. And she came to me and she said to me, Dad, she said, what union should I join? I've just joined, I've got this job doing answering the calls to 999 ambulance. Very stressful job, actually. And so I said to her, what do you mean, what union should you join? Because I saw her going out to work, and she was going out to work almost dressed like a paramedic. So I just assumed that she was in Unison, or Unison would be the union that was in the workplace. The workplace was right by Waterloo Station. There was she told me there was about 140 people who worked in that building, all doing this work, taking the calls. So she said, no, there's 3 unions in there. So I said, what, 3 unions in your workplace? So she said, yeah. So I said, well, how do you know that? She said, well, I see them during lunchtime. They all have tables out. So I said, who are the 3 unions? So she said, G&B, Unite, Unison. I said, okay. Now, I happen to think, you know, there's great union leaders all across the movement, so I'm not having a go at any individual union there. So I said, well, what are your colleagues, your friends, what are your workers saying? She said, well, from what I can see, it's about a third. I said, okay. So I said, well, I mean, why is it like that? She said, well, from what I can see, Dad, she said, they change quite a lot from one to the other. So I said, do they? So she said, yeah. So I said, what makes them change then? She said, well, when you go in the canteen, they offer different things. It might be a free cup on this, and they all join that one. Or there might have been a row going on over a pay rise, and this one didn't get... So I sat there and I thought, this can't be right. Now, we've never experienced that. We have other problems, though. We're too insular as a trade union. We're a great union, but we essentially are only representing Royal Mail, BT, telecommunication workers, some of the newer companies, which is good, and financial services workers. We need to spread our wings a bit. So the second point is, in the New Deal for Workers, is we need to have greater cooperation. We need to reintroduce, not a disputes procedure, but an actual procedure that was similar to the Bridlington principles that set out the parameters and ground rules of where unions would organise. And I've said this at General Council meetings, and initially when I said it, a few people were like, they don't want to talk about it. And then when you get out of the room, they'll come and go, I actually agree with you. So we're starting to have that conversation now, which is good. The third part of a New Deal for Workers is we've got to publish a manifesto for workers in the UK. What do we stand for as a trade union movement? What are our demands? What are we asking for? You know, and why can't we all sign up to it? Why can't there be a common set of demands that every single trade union in the UK signs up to and says that this is what we want? Now, we've actually made some progress on this. The TUC, any of you that have been to the TUC conference that's just been had, they were waving around their New Deal Charter, which is good progress. It's come out of this campaign. Unions have sat in the room and they've come up with 10 demands that represent a charter. My view, great start, not strong enough. So we went to the TUC conference and we set out the next set of demands that strengthen all of those demands, and I'll talk about them in a minute. So that's the third point, and we've made progress on it now. We've got a manifesto for trade unions. The fourth point is unavoidable, and it's the only thing that's ever going to make the union movement grow again, and it's called, you're going to have to take some form of action in support of those demands. And I'm really pleased to say that at this year's TUC conference, we pushed that with the support particularly of GMB and Unite, who amended it, and we've obviously been talking to other unions as well about this. And I don't know if you're aware of this, but the TUC has now got a unanimous policy that on the 1st of May next year, International Workers' Day, there will be a day of action in the UK for workers. And I think that's hugely important that we've actually got that at that point. And I'm telling you now, we ain't going to let that go. And our job, and my job, is to take that further and further between now and that day. And I'll talk to you about how we're going to do that as well. See, the way I look at it is this. You've got a situation at the moment, there's a figure that people don't talk about. They talk about all sorts of figures about the economy on Brexit and what's going to happen, but they never talk about this figure, which I think tells the real story about what's happened to working class people in the UK. And it's this, is that in the last 40 years, the share and proportion of workers' wages, money in their pockets, has gone down from 65% to 49% as a proportion of the overall GDP of the country. That is the number one problem that we face, is that inequality as a result of that has grown. You've got the economy of the UK is now essentially the foundation of the UK economy today is insecure work, in-work poverty. I think they're saying 14 million families are in work and actually classified. I know it's not the same as the poverty of 150 years ago, but still classified as relative poverty today. 14 million families are in work and in work poverty. I think this is a major, major problem. And the other one, of course, is austerity. You put them three things together, and I think this is the biggest attack that we've seen on working people in our lifetimes. And we have got to do something about it. We face one of two futures. Play into this debate what is going to happen in the future world of work. And and I'm sick of them talking about, well, there'll be these jobs that will go, but I'm talking about artificial intelligence. But, there'll be a few jobs over here. Make no mistake on this point. One future we face is that the likes of Google, Amazon, Microsoft, Apple, and all of those huge companies that own us, they will get stronger and stronger and wealthier and wealthier and more powerful, and it's happening right across the world. They will buy up all of the intellectual property rights that exist in society, and it's happening now. And if they do that, insecure work will be the future of work. And we'll be fighting for the scraps that those companies give us when they feel that it's right to give us those scraps. That's one future. The second future is ours to fight for as a trade union movement. And that is to build and deliver a new deal for working people in this country. And that's the future that the trade union movement has a responsibility to get behind, as well as supporting Labour and Jeremy and John. I don't put all our eggs in one basket. We have to do this. We have to do it now. So our new deal, we're talking about demands here that talk about the 4-day week. Now, the TUC had a good policy on this the other year. They got some coverage on it. And they said, we're going for a 4-day week. The problem was, they said over the next 100 years. And we all looked at each other and we all thought, well, we'll all be dead. Most of our children will be dead. So, it was a bit of a long time coming. We've gone to this year's TUC and said, the 4-day week, some people call it a campaign, and I know this don't fit for everybody because people work over weekends and there's different shifts. But if you think about it from a point of view of what we fought for to move to 5-day working, when people work 7 days, when they work 6 days, and then 5-day working become the norm. I think one of the things I've heard said is that Friday becomes the new Thursday. Now, if you think about that, we're entitled to this as a share of the benefits of the wealth and power that is being created on the back of workers in this country. And of the wealth and power that is out there now across the world that is going to fewer and fewer people because of the power of those companies and some countries, right-wing countries predominantly, that are supporting those companies for their own ends. So it's achievable. We're talking about workers' ownership funds is one of the policies that we've now put forward, a strong Labour policy as well, worked up in conjunction with the Labour Party, where we can not only renationalise industries, and we'll talk about that offer that Labour are putting forward, but we can actually change what happens in privatised industries, where workers have a greater say over investment in their future. What can be wrong with that? Imagine how the economy would grow in this country if workers actually truly had a say on how their company can invest in its future. So that's an important development that it should be one of our key demands and is now one of our key demands. We're talking about ending the control that these companies have, employers have over the use of technology. Now remember what I said about linking things? This is something that I think is involved in our dispute. And actually, I think that the whole movement, because everywhere I go when I speak at rallies, this is when I clocked this. I used to speak at rallies, and I used to use a phrase that said, you know, what it feels like to me is that everybody's working harder and faster for less. And it didn't matter where them people were working, whether they were nurses, teachers, doctors, bus workers, whatever, they were all going, that's how it feels in my job. And I'm saying that one of the reasons that workers got like that is about the intensification of work. We cannot allow technology to drive us to a work till you drop mentality. We are entitled to say, actually, that ain't good enough. Now, the stress at work is now, I understand it to be the root cause of 40% of workplace sickness. There's a reason these things are happening. And our job is to say, it might sound hard to say, how can you stop the use of technology? See, I don't buy that. I think you can. I think you can say we love it, we like to use it, but there's got to be some limits on its use against the workforce. You know, a postal worker, I was going on to say, a postal worker must feel now on their daily route like they're tagged almost like an everyday criminal who's just come out of prison. That's what it must feel like to walk around with one of these things when you know there's someone sitting back in that office who knows exactly where you are. Go and watch the new Ken Loach film, Sorry We've Missed You. I saw it the other night. Blimey, I mean, it's the biggest wake-up call to the trade union movement that I've seen for a long, long time. Unfortunately, or fortunately rather, not unfortunately, we've woken up. Now we've got to wake up a few more people. We can change the use of technology. It can be used to benefit people. I didn't say that bit, and I must get this in. A postal worker's job can be as relevant today and in the future as what it was 40 or 50 years ago. We've got ideas that we're going to push out there on what our industry could look like. Why would a postal worker not be somebody's role in the community that's expanded to support and be perhaps some of the first people that see some of the issues that elderly people face? Why couldn't we link up with a good Labour council and a good Labour Party that puts social care back at the forefront of its policies, and that a postal worker wouldn't have a role in that? Now, some of our members might find that a bit daunting, but I think this is what a postal worker is basically doing anyway. But we could coordinate that into such a great value for communities up and down the country. The economy. Why can't a postal worker be at the centre of growing the local economy? Why do we have to... We love a national service. We want to keep the national service. We could bolt on to the national service in this town. We could send these guys here out around to every single nook and cranny in Merthyr and the surrounding area, and we could find every local business person, and we could say to them, what do you want us to do that will help your business grow? And we could give the job of finding that to these guys. And one of the ways you do that, you could say, you know, that technology that has to follow them every minute of every day, we're actually going to cut them a bit of slack. We're actually going to say that we want you to help us build this industry for the future. In our big mail centres that some of our members work in, why couldn't we be, as a postal industry, why couldn't Royal Mail be a supplier of some of its own products that were ethical products that had a value to people? We could connect the UK once again, but we need to take control of technology to be able to build our industry, not let it control us. And I think that's the same right across the whole of the workforce. So the New Deal stuff is a hugely, hugely important campaign for the trade union movement. It's linked to everything that we do, everything we see every day. And that 1st of May, this is the bit I want to really get onto, because this is the bit that you can play a role in. You can go out and talk to anybody you know and start talking up that next year, I know it seems a long way off, but you've got to build for these things if we're serious about them. On the 1st of May, there's going to be a day where workers take forms of action in support of a New Deal, and here's what the New Deal is about. Now, I think that if we get this right, using some of the techniques that I've just spoken about earlier on that we've used in our own dispute, what is stopping trade unions across the UK using those same techniques? Because we've got some fantastic activists. And for the first time, and this is the beauty of the New Deal, the way we've structured it, this is not about replacing an issue that might be at the heart of a particular dispute for a particular trade union. It's actually about saying you sell your day of action on the basis of the big issue that you've got and link it to whatever you want to link it to. But it has a link somewhere, because I guarantee you some of the problems that people will have will be linked to the use of technology and how it's used to create more and more pressure on workers. So I think we can pull this off. I'm hugely confident here that if we give this our best effort, we will see a transformation in trade unions, we'll see a transformation in the TUC, and most importantly of all, we'll see unions grow again, and we'll see workers getting the deal that they deserve for the future. The fight for that deal is now. The fight for that deal is not to just rely on Labour, as good as they are. So that's my second box. I told you the first box was terms and conditions, postal workers, dispute. For our telecommunications members, there's one, Mike, I think it is, from EE, a company that we've just started representing people. But BT at the moment is a focus. EE has joined BT, and we've seen attacks on our members there grow now. We've seen the announcement this week of compulsory redundancies in what they call enterprise, global enterprise of BT. And, you know, I think we've got to use the machine that we've built to equally defend our members in the telecommunications part of the union. And I'm sure that our people who are dealing with that aspect of it are aware of that and are now ready to start looking at that if BT don't shift their position. So we've got that dispute focus, we've got the New Deal focus, and we've got the 1st of May focus that we're building towards. And then the third bit of it has to be political change. And you see, I believe that Labour's ace card, if it could ever get through Brexit, is to be able to tell people what it is going to do for working class people in this country. And to be unashamedly using that phrase. And to link that in a way that isn't old-fashioned, to link it to everybody from different ethnicities. There's people trying to keep dividing us all the time. You know, and there's lots of us good people in our own movement who are passionate about issues, who, you know, sometimes their passion then creates divisions between bits of the movement. We've got to bring it all together again. All those good people fighting for everybody who's struggling in this country. That is the Labour Party. Their offer, I think, is going to be the most significant offer for the people of this country since just after the war, when Bevin brought in the National Health Service. I've got that much confidence that their offer is going to be on that scale. I think they're going to be talking about universal basic services for everybody. And I think they're going to talk about, obviously, the NHS in that. They're going to talk about education, lifelong learning. I said earlier on, I'm chairing this commission. There's a lot of clever people there talking about this. They are talking about everybody from cradle to grave being able to access learning in a way that you've never been able to do it in the past. We're talking about union learning reps in this commission, something which was a great innovation, actually not just doing learning in the workplace, but going down to local libraries and offering those facilities and hooking up with councils. this is great thinking that's going on here in the background that isn't getting to the top. They're talking about revolutionising housing, stopping the rip-off of private rent, building affordable social housing, seriously changing the lives of people in this country. They're talking about transport in a totally different way that we've ever seen before. And that has an ability to link directly into a Green New Deal for workers and addressing climate change. You see, they're also going to talk about something about our industry. And we're going to get renationalised if Labour come in. But we've done a deal with Labour on that, and I'll say it quite openly here, because we've said to them, we don't want to go back to the nationalisation that we had, where we had no investment in our industry. And I know Labour ain't up for that. They're up for they're up for doing all the things that we just spoke about, expanding the role of postal workers, rebuilding our industry. And they're going to talk to us about what they might do with broadband. That's for another day when the election's called. But watch this space on that, because I think Labour will come up with a very important policy on broadband and its accessibility to everybody in the country. Now, this is a fantastic offer. It's an offer that is so needed in this country, and we all know that. But we've got to deliver Labour in this election. We've got to be the party, and the trade union movement has to do its bit in that, that is willing to say we're not dividing you into Remain or Leave. We stand for working class people. We stand for the people of this country. Whether you voted Remain or whether you voted Leave, you have got to realise that what's our offer here is needed, and two, is the only way that we're going to bring about change in this country. You see, I'm one of the people who, I know Brexit's hugely important, but I have not been swayed from day one on this point. It is not the defining issue of our times, like people paint it. A no-deal Brexit would have been a disaster. I don't think that's going to happen. I was saying I didn't think it was going to happen because I thought the financial powers that exist in Europe and the UK would not have allowed that to happen. Now, we've come close to it, and who knows, it might still happen. I don't think it will. But I don't think there's a huge difference, bit of honesty here, between Labour's view of what a credible leave option would be and staying in the EU from an economic point of view. The real change comes with Labour in power. And whether you're in Europe or whether you leave Europe, that change is not going to happen unless we put Labour in place. So I think we've got to find a platform to get over the Brexit thing. I'll tell you what I've said to Jeremy and John, and a few of us have said in the trade union movement. This might be an election where we have a different role to just being an affiliate of the Labour Party. This might be an election, and I'm willing to do this, where we will go to those places that are under attack and are being spun a yarn by people like Johnson and Farage in very, very dangerous ways that you know about and you can feel, and the tension's in the air. I'm willing to go to those places when Farage turned up at a working man's club in Yorkshire talking to working class people, and they were, sad to say, it appeared they were being taken in. I understand totally why they're being taken in, because their areas have been smashed to pieces. But it's our job to go out there and say, don't believe in that. Believe in what's on offer here for your children, your families, and we can bring about a fairer and more equal society. I think I've said enough. Thank you very much.